What is the best wedding that you have ever been to? Now, if you're married, your answer should be, well, my wedding. But I've had the privilege of being at a lot of weddings over the years, officiating a number of them, and some of them have been pretty amazing. Others of them have been a little bit awkward or strange, but regardless, they are a special day. Welcome to Walking Through the Word for today. We are in the Gospel of John, and we're in John chapter 2, where we see Jesus perform his first miracle at a wedding. Now, we know this as the miracle of turning water into wine, but let's back up a little bit and let's kind of talk some of the details about this because they really kind of shed light and really show some really beautiful things about it. So first of all, we see in verse 1 of chapter 2 that there was a wedding in Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, that would be Mary, and that Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. Okay, let's pause and talk about this for just a second. First of all, when we think of weddings, we think of these nice little events that usually take up about 4 hours of a day. You know, maybe if it's a night wedding, you have the ceremony, which could last, 20 to an hour, depending on what type of wedding it is. Some may a little bit more elaborate. Then you have dinner and maybe dancing and celebration. Might go until, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. A few hours of a lot of fun. Well, back then, the weddings in Jewish custom were far more elaborate and much longer. As a matter of fact, depending on how much financial ability you had, your wedding typically would last about 7 days. Even if you were poor, you did everything you could to make it last multiple days. So imagine 7 days of a wedding celebration. These were big deals. So much, in fact, that the Pharisees and the scribes would often tell you that you could forget some of the religious requirements that were there so that you could have festival all the time. For example, they would talk about fasting. The Pharisees would add fasting rules of Mondays and Thursdays. And the Pharisees would say, well, since there's a wedding this week, you don't have to fast. So weddings were a big deal. And weddings often had honored guests that may or may not have known, that may not know the bridegroom or the bride or any along those things. Like Jesus being invited to this wedding, and John pointing out that Jesus is invited, is likely because of Jesus's already growing reputation as a teacher and a scholar, hence the rabbi terms that you see all around. So Jesus would have been invited, and as a result, his disciples would have been invited as well. Now, we know from this that not all 12 were yet picked up. What we had here was the ones that we talked about. You saw Simon Peter, you saw Andrew, you saw Philip, Nathaniel, and we have an unnamed fifth disciple we know was there as well. This disciple could have been John. We don't really know. We assume it was, since he wrote the book and he doesn't really talk about himself a whole lot. He doesn't like to do that. Regardless, this is a heck of a shindig. Now, could you imagine having to put food and beverages, wine especially, to 7 days worth of festivities? Would have been a lot. Would have been a massive obligation. And it would have been incredibly shameful if you ran out of those things during the wedding. And so that's kind of what sets the stage for what we see here in chapter 2, verse 1. Jesus was also invited, verse 3, when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they're out of wine. They have no more wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Okay, stop, full stop. Let's clarify here. Some people will look at this and go, Jesus is saying, woman? That's not how Jesus says this, actually. This was actually a term of endearment or respect, kind of like ma'am here in the South. He's basically being respectful to his mother. We look at it and we say woman is disrespectful. Remember, culture is different. Okay? Jesus was being respectful to his mother. What does this have to do with me? I mean, what is it that you would like for me to do, Mom? It's not my time yet. It's not really my time to pronounce. And so then she turns and says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. That doesn't mean that Mary knows what Jesus is going to do. She doesn't know that Jesus is going to turn water into wine. She knows, though, that her son can help. And as a result of that, Jesus does answer the call. And there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. So this was clean water that was used for washing the hands and things like that. Okay? And they filled them up to the brim. All right, so now here they are full of water, and Jesus says, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. Now, could you imagine what it would have been like for the for the guy that had to draw the ladle and took it over to the host. Now, the host is not the bridegroom, okay? The host could have been another family member. We don't really know, but they're the master of the feast, okay? They took it, and the master tasted it. So somewhere in between the drawing and the taking, it turned into wine, and the whole thing turned into wine. What an incredible thing. The master tasted it and went to the bridegroom and said, "This is the best wine you've ever made. This is incredible." Most people hold this out at the beginning, and then when people are too drunk to notice, they bring the cheap wine out. You did the opposite. Now, why do we bring this up? What is this? Well, first of all, this is the first of his signs Jesus did. This is the first of his miracles, okay? And one of 6 miracles that John puts in, which, by the way, kind of coincides with the 7 days of creation. The 7th day God rested. So 6 miracles, 6 days of creation. But the thing about this is, and this is what I really want to call attention to as we run a little long today, the bridegroom here comes, and you have kept the good wine until now. And he credits the bridegroom for having this. Well, remember, Jesus calls himself the bridegroom. And Jesus is certainly going to save the best for last. He gave us eternal life and salvation upon his arrival. When the bridegroom arrived, he gave us eternal life and salvation. And when the bridegroom returns for his bride, he's going to take her into something that is far more amazing and powerful than even we can imagine. So there's a beautiful parallel in this story of the bride and the bridegroom, and how Jesus, our groom, takes us into the best. He saves the best for last. All right, there's our thought for the day. We will talk more tomorrow. Have a blessed one.